I vividly remember the first time a cold blade was held against my neck. The side of the knife was roughly pressed against my throat, turning every swallow into a rigorous task. Not only that, but the inn's muggy air was like poison to such a milksop that I was at the time. With my brow drenched in sweat, I looked around myself, beseeching help with scared eyes and faint grunts of discomfort. Among all the patrons, none had the courage to stand up for me. The villagers simply stared at me, and only later did I realize how prudent they were. Some, mostly the bar wenches, had faces filled with sorrow, a beacon of humanity that gave me a few rays of hope in such a terrific situation. Others weren't as kind, however. The men continued drinking as if nothing interesting was happening around them, but a few looked at me with contempt, their mouths frowning and eyes filled with low-minded disdain. "Serves him right," they must have said to themselves. "He can only blame himself for trouble." I wished they were wrong, but the deadly event was entirely my innocent ass's fault. "Well, what's up with you, Sir Knight? Cat got your tongue?" said my captor. The only things worse than his breath was his looks, and how firmly he held the weapon. Crumbs of bread were scattered around his unkempt beard, while spilled ale sank into the fabric of his tattered gambeson. His companions began laughing at my expense, all dressed in poor quality clothing, most likely taken from their previous victims. I remember how I sat in the middle of the inn, my heart beating faster than ever before as almost everyone's attention was fixated on my horrible situation. Even if I had the courage to fight back, the other brigands would have slain me within a moment. Aside from my captor, there were 6 or 7 of those criminals inside, willing to risk the militia's involvement just so they could observe my interrogation. "Ah, well, I'm just thinking," I muttered after a few painful seconds passed since the question was asked. Obviously, they have been mocking me, making fun out of my lack of control over the situation. Those men knew how young and naive I was, as at that time my worldview was built on tales, rumours, and the occasional trips outside my family's manor. Back then, I was truly unique in the sense that I trusted the world and its denizens. My hair was thick and well-combed, while my young and unscarred body was covered by a set of pricey clothes. That is how I dared to wander around the world, with a head full of chivalric legends, my late uncle's chainmail, and an arming sword to my name. My loyal servant, Eva, was the last person I could rely on, but she wandered away, trying to fetch some feed for my horse. Not as if an elderly maid could have saved me from a band of thugs. "You've had plenty of time for thinking, boy. Tell me where your friends are or I'll gut you," the man continued. "The Knights of the Alehouse?" "Who else? We've been mentioning their name for half an hour now." Even after such a long time has passed, my head could barely comprehend the events. How could I end up hostage on my first destination? If I were a bird, I could have seen the stone foundations of my home. "Well, they aren't my friends, you see. I, simply wish to meet them regarding the land. I do not wish to join them. My humble self only wishes to find a lord I could serve." After gathering all the courage left inside myself, I managed to tell a lie without stuttering. It was not a convincing lie, but I'd rather try my chance than to bleed out inside a dust-ridden inn. "And I'm the queen of the Ranthwegs." "Nice try, boyo," but my mate heard it otherwise. "Hando!" the leader of the group shouted, and a scoundrel with a piece of red cloth wrapped around his head nodded. He made his way to the poor innkeeper, who has just finished serving another young traveller. The brigand grabbed him by the collar of the innkeeper's tunic and slammed him on top of a table. Even then, the sane patrons stayed silent. Only the sick laughter of mentally sick men filled the air. Then their leader calmed them down and asked a question. "Tell us, good sir, what did the knight tell you?" "By the fire, let me go," shouted the poor man. "He wants to join them. Now please, let go of me." Soon after that, the innkeeper was let go. In a hurry, he ran into what I assume was the kitchen, and I felt alone in the world again. The captain of those disgusting brigands turned his head back to me. "What's wrong, boyo? Are you out of tricks?" Yes, I wish to join their ranks, but I knoweth not a thing." It was a miracle that I managed to hold back any tears. If I had even one rolling down my cheeks, I would have ended my life a long time ago. I only spoke to their leader through letters, and even then, it was only a few. Oh, I'm sure that you two discussed some nice things then. Surely there was something in those letters, he said, and twisted his blade so that the edge of the knife was touching my skin. Those bastards caused us lots of trouble, boyo. I would love to see them drown in their own blood. I swear on my honor that I do not know anything about them. Now please, let me go or hold me for ransom, I pleaded, willing to become their slave if it meant that I could keep my life. You're a Kaskia brat, aren't you? I'd recognize that coat of arms anywhere, dark blue and cayenne with a golden wolf in the middle. Your family is poor as hell, boyo. I'd earn more from selling your sickly horse than from the purse of your indebted father. Anger has slowly began replacing the fear inside my heart. Even now, I hate to admit that the truth hurt more than the insult. Back then, my dynasty was impoverished indeed, forced to abandon many of its holdings after multiple conflicts with our neighbors. Part of me wanted to leave, as a way to escape the shame I had to endure throughout my childhood. They'll pay for what they have done to my pal, Kuno the Ugly. He wasn't always called that, you know. The bandit, wearing a piece cloth on his head, began to talk. He used to be handsome and full of dreams. Whatever their crimes might be, I had nothing to do with them. Please, sir, let me go on my way. You won't regret it. Even then, I did not understand why I continued to plead for those barbarians. My life has already flashed before my eyes, and I have said my last prayers to the Creator. Whenever he did abandon us, or simply watches mankind from afar, I had the chance to find out soon enough. So you could warn them? Not a chance. No more games. We're going to give them a surprise. With closed eyes, I finally accepted my fate. Questions began wandering in my mind. Does the fallen feel the pain which sends them to the other side, or the realization of their deaths comes too late for them to notice? But before I could learn the truth, someone shouted from the inn's entrance. Actually, I would love to play a round of dice or two. The silhouette of a man in armor stood in the doorframe, his features ironically hidden by the sunlight behind him. His voice was husky, and he spoke our language in an accent I have never heard before. It was clear that he was a foreigner, and that he wouldn't kneel before anyone. But I see that I have some unfinished business here. Silly old me. Laurits, how did you find us? My captor took a step backwards, shocked by the appearance of my saviour. I sighed in relief and promised not to miss my sacrifices to the heavens ever again. I tortured one of your men for information, came the reply. Many inside the inn gasped, shocked to encounter so much brutality in a single day. The brigands, of course, were staring at the man with terrified eyes. What? Oh, you want to slice someone's throat and no one says a thing, but when I break some idiot's arms and burn his— Holy hell, Laurits, stop! We get it! My captor shouted back in a tight voice, letting go off me in the process. With some hesitation, I began reaching for my dagger dangling from my belt, something I never thought I had to use in combat. We get it. You are fucked in the head. There is no need to base your whole personality around it. My, is that really how you greet your fellow man? We've been talking for like 5 minutes. 5 minutes too late. Such inactivity will only lead you down a dark path, young man. Why can't you be normal? Seriously, this is one of the reasons why we burned down your stupid beer caravan. Putting his knife away, the leader of the brigands cracked his knuckles, picked up his hatchet, which has been resting on the table before me. His men armed themselves as well, ready to fight the heroic stranger. This so-called Laurits simply stared at them. It was clear that he wasn't in the mood for jokes after that insult. He slowly but surely walked inside, revealing his armor as torches reflected from the steel he was carrying. Laurits's wealth was obvious, much like my poverty. He wore sabatons, a piece of armor for the foot which I have never seen before that moment. His knees and thighs were covered by metal plates as well, while a mail skirt covered his groin. A brigandine coloured in red was the only thing protecting his torso, a strange sight for someone who has only seen chainmail before. More plates were visible on his arms, covering his upper and lower arms, pieces of armor called a rear brace and a vambrace, respectively, alongside his elbows. Most interesting part of his outfit was his unique helmet, however. Even to this day, I have never seen anything unlike it, although the helmets the nomadic Kargotta wear are quite similar. The back part reminded me of a helmet called a barbute, but the piece of plate which covered the face was different from feudalistic designs. It was shaped like a man's face, with all the details one would see on a head made of flesh. The helm stared at the scoundrel with a judging look, almost frowning from the hate his wearer was feeling. It had a certain aura to it that I have never seen in any normal item made by man. For Oroitz's enemies, the face filled them with fear and dread, while those who were on his side found hope and courage. And that is exactly what happened on that day. With trembling hands, the morale of the brigands was visible shaken as the memories of their last encounter with Oroitz was fresh and filled with blood. My saviour was calm, although he found it hard to control himself. In an unsatisfying way, he pulled out a short sword and put on a metal buckler onto his left hand. "Hey, Oro, there. Look, there is no need to cause a scene here," said the bandit captain. "We could work things out. This lad here was planning to join your company anyway. How about we hand him over to you, and in return you let us go?" "Oh, interesting. Very, very interesting." Oroitz seemed to have calmed down after hearing the offer. I saw him take a quick glance at me, looking at my horrified state with concerned eyes. But Kalervo will be the judge of that. "My God, no!" one of the brigands shouted. As his pleads fell upon deaf ears and echoed throughout the inn, another shadowy figure entered the doorframe. He was much taller, and only when he entered did I understand why. Less elegant than his companion, the beast they called Kalervo wore a worn-down chain shirt, with a lamellar chest piece made of leather on top of it. A brown bear's pelt adorned his back, cut savagely as if it was torn off by hand. Despite this primitive look, he wore metal greaves on his legs and vambraces, latter of which was similar to Oroitz's. His facial features were either hidden by his beard or his helmet's nasal and check guard. The helm was somewhat pointy, reminding me of the usual nasal helmets of feudal design, although it had two small horns poking out of its sides. My brutish saviour held his two-handed axe with such strength that I was sure that the wood could break at any given moment. Even I understood the reasoning behind the terror. This Kalervo was not an ordinary man, but one born in the wild, far away from the protective stone walls I grew up in. He knew nothing of the burden of civilization, nor the luxuries of a peaceful and easy life. My older brother, heir to our family's remaining lands, often told me stories of such savage peoples, tales of their crimes and how they worship idols instead of the Creator, the renouncer God. "Kalervo, my dearest companion," said Oroitz with much delight, "I humbly ask for your everlasting wisdom. Shall we allow such filth to wander back to their forest dwellings so that we can free their hostage?" The savage simply grunted loudly, spat on the ground and barked at the brigands. Many of the inn's patrons jolted towards the entrance, smartly leaving the scene behind. For others, there was no other way out but through the two bloodthirsty men. "I couldn't have said it better," said Oroitz. "Fellas, please, The bandit captain tried to talk his way out, but I swiftly stabbed him under his left shoulder. Blood began to flow between my fingers for the first time, the crimson ichor staining the sleeve of my shirt. For a split second, I thought that I had the man in my grasps, but the captain quickly responded by almost breaking my nose with his elbow. Never have I felt such pain before. Looking back at it now, with my body still aching from the battles of my past, it was nothing more than a light bruise. But I used to be such a mama's boy that even the sound of thunder could have scared me. Meanwhile, Oroitz threw the contents of a table at a bandit near him. This distracted his foe for a time, letting the nobleman to close the distance between the two. He stabbed the brigand in the throat and pushed the corpse aside. Next, he deflected a swinging sword, and just like mere seconds before, he opened up another windpipe with a quick stab. Laurits was graceful like a swan, but he loved to mix agility with brute force. "Wasps are good role models," he told me once, a sentence which accurately summarized his entire being. Kalervo was less sophisticated, but I never expected any elegance from a wildman. He simply swung his axe left and right, tearing flesh, breaking bones, and spilling guts in front of himself. The barbarian also killed 2 men with relative ease, as if he was just sweeping the floor. My mind has quickly turned desensitized after seeing the amount of blood spilled that day. Thanks to the adrenaline, I barely noticed the freshly painted walls now drowning in the juices of my fellow man. And that was my second revelation. Scum, savages, killers, and madmen possessed similar mortal shells to my own. As quickly as I gained hope in the heavens, I lost part of it. Legends tells us how the fall of man was our own fault, how humanity chose to get abandoned. Although I could join the flock of sheep who have disdain for the Creator, I saw the pinnacle of man's worst sides from up close. Perhaps we did deserve to get banished, as the screams of a bandit still echo inside my head. Oh, why? Kuno is even uglier now. Inspired by the actions of my saviors, I quickly got a hold of myself and threw a pitch of beer at my captor, taken from the table of a weary traveller. Unfortunately, this did not bring the results I was wishing for. Although blinded by the alcohol, he kept walking towards me, swinging his weapon like a madman, trying his best to cleave my skull in. I continued stepping backwards, hoping to come up with a plan while my newfound allies took care of the remaining outlaws. Seconds later, the captain opened his eyes and grunted in pain. Despite the thickness of his coat, it was now clear that I managed to inflict a wound upon him. Then I ran and bashed the brigand with my shoulder, knocking him backwards and into the side of a table. As expected, he swung his hatchet once more and almost hit my arm. In response, I kicked him in the chest twice, naively expecting him to bleed put. When I raised my foot for the 3rd time, he grabbed my boot and pulled me closer to himself, hoping to push the blade of his weapon into my flesh, like how someone would use a hacksaw. After a punch that likely hurt me more than him, the table behind him has collapsed. Kalervo threw someone on top of it, and with one fell swoop, he brought down his axe, destroying the man's insides and the table in the process. This caused the scoundrel captain to let go of my leg and allowed me to reach for my dagger. My blade twisted and turned under the marauder's shoulder, causing immense pain for my foe, a side effect that wasn't intentional. Soon, I managed to pull out my diminutive weapon, and in a series of swift motions, I have begun stabbing the bandit in the chest. The human body is resilient, however, and combined with the thickness of the gambeson, I could not kill him. While red spots began appearing throughout his torso, my foe grabbed the head of his hatchet and used it to punch me in the face. I fell upon my buttocks, holding my bleeding wound and trying to hold back tears from rolling down my cheeks. But as I watched my future companions in action, I managed to gather my remaining strength. Laurits was having a short-lived duel with the bandit wearing a cloth around his head. The scoundrel appeared to be more experienced than his mates, but after clashing his sword against the nobleman's blade, Laurits managed to find an opening and inflicted a grieve wound on the man's stomach. The last bandit dropped his weapon and tried to run for the inn's entrance, only for Kalervo to mutilate one of his legs in a single strike. Many will question my sanity, but seeing all of those disgusting unwashed highwaymen bleeding on the cold floor, crying in pain and dying, lifted my spirit that day. I knew that justice still existed in the world, that evil can be purged and exterminated. No matter how though they can act when harassing the innocent, a blade thick enough will puncture their skin the same way it could puncture mine or yours. I was going to have my revenge. I wished to laugh at their agony, but I held myself back. Knowing the faces of their killers was enough punishment, and anything more would have made me drop down on their level. Somehow, in that heated battle, my mind reminded me of my heritage, of my knightly training, and the principles of chivalry. Later, I learned how hard it is for a man to hold back his battle lust, to contain himself from biting his own shield before a fight. Despite my physical weakness at that moment, I would consider holding back my rage to be a great achievement, so I rose up to my knees and quickly ended the captain's life. My dagger pierced his rough neck, giving him the same death that he wished upon me. As the brigand began choking on his own blood, I saw regret in his eyes, something that in another sickening moment filled me with determination and even calmness. Through a trial of combat, I proved my worth. It was one of rare instances of bliss, where I had no doubt in myself. There was no regret in my heart as I stood up for myself and came out on top. When the adrenaline wore off, I felt vomit running up my throat, but through another miracle, I managed not to throw up on a corpse. I heard the steady sound of spurs approaching me, and the muffled voice of Laurits called out to me, "Nice job, friend. I'm glad that you decided to join in on the fun." "Ah, my cheek," I cried silently. Behind the nobleman, Kalervo finished off the last bandit by stomping the man's brains out. Whoever decided to stay and watch the fight most likely had nightmares during that night. I know, as I haven't slept well for 3 nights after that day. That's nothing. My friend Kalervo was cut in half once. Huh? What? I could barely stand up, let alone understand what Laurits was saying. I wish I was joking. Sankarians are a magnificent people, don't you think? He took another step towards me and leaned down, offering to shake my hand. I am Laurits, Count of Garagardoa, but you probably know this already. You must be Laurits. What a beautiful name. Ranthweg is such a wonderful language, yes. After a firm handshake, he helped me with getting back on my feet and quickly turned his attention towards his friend. Now, I don't know about you boys, but I got thirsty in this brawl. My throat is so sore. Well, I wished to say a proper response, but before I could even think of something to say, both of them made their way to the now horrified innkeeper. Laurits searched through a pocket sewn into the rear of his pants and pulled out a golden coin. He forced the object into the innkeeper's trembling hands and reached forward with his right hand. "Your finest ale, please," Laurits said while yawning loudly. The man looked at the other patrons for advice, but no one could say a thing. Soon he walked away, only to come back with 2 wooden cups filled to the brim with the foamy liquid. "You're a man of humour, aren't you? Where is the 3rd one? Don't leave poor Laurits out of the fun." What? Once again, I could do nothing but question the world around me. Not only did I kill a man for the first time in my life, I was also in the middle of what seemed to be a strange joke. Not a man of words, huh? Well, you heard me right. The time has come to cool off. It is the middle of summer after all. Excuse me, Sir Knight, but I lost my appetite after, you know. After what? Asked Laurits. I looked around myself, taking a good look at the fresh corpses. A few minutes before, some of them were still crying from the pain my saviour inflicted upon them. This might have been a minor skirmish, but a victory nonetheless. Come, friend, we should celebrate. The militia is most likely on its way. You know our name, don't you? The Knight of the Alehouse. We are in a similar establishment, are we not? I suppose you are not wrong, but... Well, Laurits, you wish to join us, no? I could not respond. Regret began creeping over my soul, but then the 2 men raised their glasses at me. Kalervo flashed a crooked smile, while Laurits giggled behind his mask like a child. There was a chance that this was the way they'd initiate new members of their warband, and I could not allow myself to fail such a simple task. So with careful steps, I approached them, and soon enough they gave me a cup of beer. After a quick toast, we began drinking. I took a small sip, trying to enjoy the drink as if it was wine, and to my surprise, the 2 men drank it all under the blink of an eye. Laurits ordered another round, and a realization hit me. A single gold coin here could buy you probably a dozen cups, or more. So many drink for such a minor skirmish, no? I asked. Right. Let us talk while we wait for our minds to go numb. Kalervo, Introduce yourself to the newest member of our humble organization." The savage lifted his right arm up, signaling me to shake hands with him. Seeing what could happen to me if I refused, I shook it. To my surprise, the handshake was only painful for a moment and wouldn't break the bones in my hand. Kalervo grunted in approval, while the pain reminded me of the fact that no, I was not dreaming. He's a shy individual, but you two will be great friends. Pleasure to meet you. This is such a great day. I have been eager to drink with you ever since you sent your first letter to me. It is not often that I hear about our fame spreading beyond my homeland. Well, the man who told me about your exploits was very excited to share the stories about you. To hear those tales, and the news that you're recruiting was wonderful. A sense of comfort came over me as the alcohol made its way into my head. Then it all came crashing down as Laurits poured down another cup through his helmet's eye holes. You are making me blush, Laurits. In my beautiful homeland of Nazria, many hold disdain over my unique lifestyle. That is why I established the Knights of the Alehouse, to unite us, misfits, and to use our power for good. Incredible, I told him, while trying to come to terms with his eccentric personality. I do have a question, however. Why would a knightly order's grandmaster wander all alone with a single bodyguard all the way to the north? Oh, it's because we're all, said Laurits before drinking his third cup of beer. All? What does that mean? Excuse me for my grammar, Laurits. My skill with the Ranthweg language is still limited. But Kalervo, as I mentioned it before, is a Sunkarian, so he taught me the basic rules for your language. He paused for a moment and waited until his friend finished his drink as well. When Kalervo put down his cup, he let out a satisfied grunt. What I meant to say is that the Knights of the Alehouse has only 2 members, or 3, now that you joined us. You are a knightly order with... Laurits interrupted me as I quietly muttered these words. He gave more money for the innkeeper, but this time he paid in silver. Ah, sorry for interrupting you. I had some coins I had to get rid of. What did you say? Knightly order. I prefer the term private military contractor. I like the length of it. What does that even mean? You aren't a knight? My heart was racing, much like when I accepted my death. The world fell all around me. I have left my home and shattered my worldview to join a band of mercenaries. Is there a difference between a knight and a wealthy nobleman? Yes, there is. Exactly. I mean, when you look at it from a material point of view, anyone can be a knight if they wanted to. The chivalric life is something which requires diligence and self-sacrifice. One must be ready to throw his life on the life to defend the women, children, sick and elderly of this wretched world. I straightened my back and finally finished my first cup. My vision became blurred and my confidence has increased. A sorcerer can blow us up all the same. Look, Laurits, we won't stop you from being a knight and saving orphans and all that. Do you really need another drinking buddy, Laurits? I signed up to ensure the years I wasted to achieve knighthood won't go to waste. Fear grasped my heart. Never did I imagine myself talking back to a man like Laurits. In the few letters that we exchanged with each other, his carefree replies were enough for me to recognize the power he held. If I remember correctly, he used to be the 3rd biggest landowner in his kingdom. As to what he used most of that land for, I have only learned later. You have guts, son. I'll give you that. What about this? I will swear on the hops I grow back home that you will become exalted among men, but only if you stop complaining, finish your drinks, and come with us. The reply was oddly calm and well thought out. I have only known the real Laurits for a couple of minutes, yet his charisma touched me. My worldview has been shattered under half an hour. I didn't think of myself as a real knight, a man that I always dreamt of becoming. My only chance for glory was nothing more than this vile duo, whose smell was perhaps worse than the one of my captor. A nobleman addicted to freedom and ale, obsessively running away from his duties in the pursuit of adventure. and a savage wild man, the villain straight out of a fairy tale. Yet they were smiling. Laurits loudly chuckled to himself, while Kalervo grunted at me playfully, as if he was telling me to take my chances and join them on their journeys. This was pure insanity. "Come on, Laurits. You didn't come this far to say no." Laurits continued his speech, and deeply I knew that he was right. My fate wasn't to fight in the war of the nobility I grew to hate, nor was it about me rotting away in a crumbling castle, wondering when they would take our last possessions away. These two smelled. They smelled bad, but at least they knew my worth, something I myself was unsure about back then. "Very well," I said with a heavy sigh. "I will be a pub knight."